Hey guys, it's Kurjun again, and after 3 days of playtesting, I have made tier lists for DPS, support, and tank. In today's video, we're going to go over the tank tier list. I'm going to explain each hero, what they do in 132, and I'm going to explain their faults and what they're good at, and then we'll set all of this up for the support and the DPS lists later to come this weekend or on Monday. So with that said, let's get into it. So the tank role in 132 probably had the most dynamic shift out of everything. Tanks previously were more control based and more limited in what they could do. They were anchored to the ground. They didn't really have a lot of options, didn't really have a choice. Hence why people didn't want to play tank. But we'll go over that as we get further down, and we're going to transition into me evaluating the other rank. So here's my previous ranking and my previous thoughts and evaluations of the tanks. I had put ERISA as probably the worst. I had put Reinhardt and Sigma at the middle ground for control, and I put Winston and Wrecking Ball ahead. I didn't know that D.Va, Hog, and Zarya would still remain in the tank category. With this being said, I feel like I got Reinhardt, Sigma, and ERISA wrong, and I also didn't evaluate D.Va, Roadhog, and Zarya going into this. So, with that being said, if we evaluate D.Va, Roadhog, and Zarya as tanks now, that's going to mean that we have to look at the single tank picture. When we look at D.Va, Roadhog, and Zarya as single tanks in 222, they all seem like trash outside of D.Va, and D.Va just gets away barely as a dive solo tank. But Hog and Zarya are really weak in a solo tank in 222 meta, but Blizzard buffed them. With that being said, Zarya got an AoE shield, Roadhog got a damage reduction heal for an AoE aura, and D.Va got increased defense matrix on top of being tuned more heavily armor-wise. Zarya also got more health, and Roadhog stayed the same outside of receiving a rework for his Take a Breather. That being said, I think that we can go ahead and crack into the tier list now and evaluate what happened with all of the tanks. So, let's go ahead and get into the first thing. The worst tank in 132 is Reinhardt. And because of how triple DPS plays with mobility, one-shots, and target focus, Reinhardt's really weak. Reinhardt struggles unless the team plays around him. Reinhardt's shield isn't strong enough to mitigate enough of the damage because there's too much of it. His fire strike is weak, his pin isn't usable, and his melee damage got buffed, but with Stalwart and all of the stuff he has, it's still not enough. You just get eaten alive. The only time you should play Reinhardt is pretty much when your team is playing all around you and they're supporting just the main tank pick. Otherwise, almost every other tank is better in every option. Reinhardt's weakness here shows that he doesn't have another tank to support him, and that's his biggest flaw and fault. So when playing Reinhardt in 132, it's genuinely better just to swap to somebody else. Ways that could fix Reinhardt, potentially make him faster, but that breaks him, give his shield massive amounts of shield, but people don't like that. So I think Reinhardt's pretty safe to say he's at the bottom of this list, and we can only tune him up from here. Now we get into the slightly better tanks, but still feel relatively weak. We look at Roadhog and Sigma. They're probably around the same. Roadhog is arguably just a 600 health DPS. He doesn't really accomplish the tank's goal of taking space or doing anything really well outside of fragging. His AoE aura is nice, but unless everybody plays in it, you're not going to get a lot of value out of it. His hook and his shotgun are still strong, but he's a DPS. A DPS walking into you doesn't create space generally. He doesn't really offer any mitigation to the team with everybody playing so split and wide. So Roadhog is lower on this list. Ways they could potentially fix Roadhog are to just straight up move him to the DPS category. For the longest time, Roadhog has been a tank not in the tank world. Like, at this point, I think that Blizzard needs to just own up to the fact that Roadhog isn't a tank, move him into the DPS category, and adjust his health, and make him a big boy version of Reaper with a CC ability. I think that's the only way you can salvage him. With that being said about Roadhog, we can go ahead and transition into Sigma. So Sigma's case is really weird. Sigma is a hero that arguably should do very, very, very well in 132. He has the most mitigation, he has the most damage, and he has the most quote-unquote abilities to control the team fights. The problem from Stigma stems from the fact that people aren't playing clustered anymore, and Sigma's greatest fault is he's not a duelist. Sigma's a team mitigator and a team fight fighter. So with Sigma not being able to duel, you're almost better off playing every other tank in this situation. Sigma just edges out Reinhardt because he has ranged damage and CC on top of mitigation. Sigma has more mitigation than Rein, and he has higher damage output via range. His ultimate is also arguably better in 132. So I would play Sigma over Rein, but I don't think there's a way they can balance Sigma in 132 without massively increasing his damage and making him a DPS. His mitigation tools are fine. Other than that, he needs buffs all around. And then that's pretty much all you can do with Sigma in here. Now we get into ERISA. ERISA is a hero that fundamentally in 132 should not function well. But because she is again ranged, which edges out Reinhardt, and she has as much mitigation as Sigma does, she's actually going to hedge him out in a lot of categories. Well, Roadhog has higher damage, but Orisa applies pressure. When an Orisa walks into you, you have to respect an Orisa. When a Roadhog walks into you, you can just blow him up. Orisa's mitigation tools make her an actual tank, whereas Roadhog is just a big fat DPS. So, when evaluating Orisa, I had to take Orisa with a grain of salt. Orisa suffers from the same problems that Reinhardt does. Your team has to play around Orisa. If your team doesn't play around Orisa, you're going to wind up in a situation where you just basically stand on the objective or you stand in a corner and you just shoot at people. Maybe you throw out a halt occasionally, maybe you fortify when people collapse on you, but you don't really have an impact to the team fight, and that leads to a problem. The problem with Orisa fundamentally is she doesn't have a high enough damage output to be. She's threatening, but she is not a game-breaking hero. Orisa applying pressure is great. Bongo is a great tool for 132. But with the range and the mobility that people are playing, Orisa can't effectively duel, which is what a lot of this stuff comes down to. In this situation, I think that probably the only steps Blizzard could take would be to increase Orisa's damage. And arguably she would be fine. Going from maybe 11 damage per shot up to arguably like 17 or 20, she could be a very, very potent tool in 132. But the running trend with most of these low tier tanks on this tier list is they lack the ability to duel and duel damage. That's what fundamentally makes Orisa weak and why she winds up in this slot on the tier list. Now we get into one of the ones that I couldn't evaluate well enough. I think that Hammond is arguably could be at the top tier, but I lack the mechanics, and the team-oriented environment didn't really suit Hammond. But Hammond is the pinnacle duelist when it comes to 1v1s in Overwatch. I actually argue that Hammond could be potentially better than a lot of the other DPS and tanks because of his one-shot combo. On top of his one-shot combo, he applies great mobility, which is something that defines in 132. So with Hammond, I think that the only thing that Blizzard needs to do, and he's probably the most balanced out of all the tanks, is they just need to make it so that Hammond can actively duel other heroes with outside of his one-shot potential. Whether that means adjusting numbers or moving things around, I think that Hammond is in a really good spot, and I think that all that needs to be done to him is to add maybe more consistent damage in his left click or to make his other abilities more useful in other certain windows. And with that being said, let's transition into the top three. In the top slots, we have Winston, D.va, Zarya, and that's not really shocking. Zarya got a massive buff. Zarya is going to be your go-to tank for almost every control comp. The new AoE bubble on her team shield is the best thing that's ever happened to her. On top of the damage change, on top of her whole kit feels like an actual tank now. Zarya suffered from the same problem Winston did, and because of that, she often wound up in the category of, I'm just a DPS in the tank slot. Now she isn't. She's actually a front liner. She can push in. Her and her team have amazing team push potential now. And because of that, she's actually one of the best tanks in the game now. Arguably, they could shift her damage around, but other than that, I think Zarya is in a great place. I actually hope this winds up going to live with 222 because this Zarya is awesome. Transitioning into the second best tank is D.va. D.va arguably didn't change much, but D.va being broken in 222 and being good in 222 doesn't shock anybody. They gave her more defense matrix and they reverted her armor change, so of course she's going to be good. She's going to be a great mitigating tool, and because of the presence of hit scans and the mobile DPS, she can chase people down. She's going to constantly be the person who's taking fights, taking, all the angles. She's going to be doing something constantly. The 3-second booster, arguably, is a little overpowered. I like the live change where it goes to 4 seconds, but I still think it's not enough to push D.va into the completely god tier category. While she's good, she's not broken. And she's an interchangeable for our number one hero, which is going to be Winston. We'll get to him in a second. But like I said, D.va is just going to be your all-around duelist. She's the best tank duelist. She's a really good DPS duelist. She can hunt supports. She's mobile. She's everything you want, everything and more. And that's pretty much it. But we're going to transition into the number one pick now, which is going to be Winston. Winston straight up in the current meta is going to be your best pick because of the prevalence of the top 3 DPS picks on my DPS list, which I will get to in another video. Basically, Widow is the person you chase. You can shut a Widow down. Widow is arguably one of the best, and Winston just mitigates Widow. Winston mitigates most hit scans. Winston can take duels. Winston is mobile. Winston has HP. Winston is going to be your go-to pick. The only times you're going to get off of Winston are probably going to be when you get hard countered by control comp, and then you're just going to transition into Zarya. But up until almost every other aspect, you're going to be playing Monkey. And then this is going to lead us into what basically Blizzard's design philosophy is. When Reinhardt is good, Winston is bad. When Winston is good, Reinhardt is bad. And it's all coming back to mobility. Mobility and mitigation. Winston isn't chained mitigating for his team like Reinhardt is. Reinhardt's shield more in a game than almost every other class. And that's fundamentally why Reinhardt is flawed. And that's why when Winston is good, Reinhardt is bad. And when Reinhardt's good, where you have to have constant mitigation, Winston is terrible. Because, to be honest, Winston doesn't really have good mitigation. But other than that, Winston's going to be your go-to pick. You can go ahead and evaluate all 3 of these picks, and they're going to be your default go-tos. And that's going to be it for the S-tier tanks. With all that being said, guys, this is going to be the end of the tier list. I hope this explains some of the stuff and faults with each of the tanks, and I hope it explains what you should be doing. I'll elaborate more on this on my stream if you want to stop by. You can like, subscribe to the videos. The support video will be out tomorrow at some point, and then the DPS video will be out shortly after that. DPS video is going to take me longer because it's going to probably be around a 20 or 30 minute video. The support video should be like this one, around 10 to 15 minutes. I hope you all enjoyed. You can like, comment, and subscribe. Follow me on my Twitter. Follow me on my Twitch. And have a good one, y'all.